Hear any?
You know, the Water Commission has responsibility over water storage in California.
They're hearing a comparable presentation from their colleagues, I think, as we are talking right now.
Yesterday.
Yes. Was it yesterday? Okay.
Would your coalition be up to endorsing the recommendation in the Delta Plan that calls them to conduct the study statewide to look for additional locations that are suitable for additional storage?
I don't know that we would think they were necessarily the best group. We've agreed that absolutely it should be looked at. Whether they're the best people to look at it, I'm not sure. I think maybe working with groups like Aqua might even be more effective, where there's a measure of trust as opposed to another state agency wondering what are they doing and do they want to own my storage and so forth. So we want it done for the same reasons you do. Who's best at doing it, where you get the best information, I think I'd look to other sectors as well.
Okay, that's great. I would encourage you to talk to the Commission and Aqua. I think those would be very good conversations to have in terms of furthering the ability to provide flexibility in the system that we all agree is necessary. But I mentioned the Commission because they're statutorily responsible for overseeing that.
There's one comment I would say about Mr. Ray's comment on timing. You can wait till they come out with it. They're not going to include it if they come out on schedule. They haven't started, unless someone comes forward and says, yeah, they are doing it. That's great. So then what that means is delay, because eventually they will have to look at it. They'll figure out under CEQA, NEPA, and everything else, they got to look at this alternative. So then they'll have to loop back again and then do another draft. I've done that. You know, I've done these projects. It's easier to get it closer on your first draft than have to go back and put it back in. But that's, your level of comfort on this. My observation is that legislation 2009, you were supposed to be big actors in this. Your plan was supposed to mean something. You're supposed to influence actions, not just plans. And this is a case where we'd like to see some action. We want good action. How do we get there sooner rather than later? I encourage you to exercise leadership.
Let me just weigh in. I'll refrain from having too much fun with the politics of all the situation. But Randy asked the question I was going to start with, which how does this affect Valley agriculture? Because the co-equal goals that govern our action, to the extent they also govern the action of BDZP and reflect, as the law says, state policy, require us to talk about a reliable water supply for all of California, not just our friends. And you don't have to respond on an answer to that. I think I can imagine it. But it is one of the things you need to think about. I am primarily there concerned with the notion that indirectly we create the circumstance where increased groundwater depletion is the choice of option while other more rational policies are pursued. That is fundamentally not in the public interest of the state of California, and it is a politically complicated mess. But let me go to my specific questions. You don't have to respond to this, but I think one of the biggest initial questions for your idea on size is likely to be the impact on species benefit from a reduced size facility that has to be operated in a way to minimize the existing water export facilities' damage to fish species. And I don't know what a right answer is, and it's not worth, it seems to me, debating that today. But I would suggest to you that that is almost a fundamental question. If you cannot pass that threshold, and from all the scientific information, it's not a one point in time, forever and all time, it's a fluctuating barrier. That is a problem. I think the stuff that you sat through some of the earlier presentations on threats to the existing export system from catastrophic failure, which is partially a motivation of your proposal, if I understand it correctly, relates to that. But the second thing that caught my attention is you've got this cost summary, which I thought was a remarkably useful chart in the whatever it's called, the little 6-page, 7-page document. But as I read this, it feels to me as if you think that $14 to $16 billion is on the table for anything that anybody can think of, but that is not the case. The offer, at least, is $14 to $16 billion from the water contractors for a facility of whatever size it turns out to be that they think they want to pay for, plus the required legal mitigation for that project, plus the undetermined, we got to do more for CEQA, we got to do more for HCP and NCCP, which are undefined. And this portfolio project, both its strength and its weakness, is a broad-based approach that goes far beyond the current limits of BDCP. So, for example, the water bond proposed for the 2014 ballot does not include money for facilities, but it might include it includes money for underground or surface storage, undefined. It includes money for Delta water improvements, but it is not directly tied to BDCP. This calls for a restructuring of the water bond, as best I understand it, which is fine. That debate is going on. I could be wrong, but my general impression is that the water agencies of California collectively tend to view bonds and the state general obligation bonds in particular as sources of revenue for their local projects. And you have said that the local water agencies, I guess, are going to carry the lion's share of the local supply development, the improved water agency integration, and maybe even storage. And all I can tell you is sitting here for almost 3 years now, and sitting in Dell Division before that, and my 25 plus years as an elected politician, I ain't seen nobody stand up and say they want to pay for all the things that they'd like to see done, which gets to my real point. How reliable is it to expect local water agencies up and down the state to aggressively do things when they have come here and on the Delta plan told us nothing should be mandatory, everything should be voluntary, anything you say that should be done, like God save us, we should actually implement our urban water management plan or our has been rejected universally. And this approach, which appeals to me, at least in a broad conceptual sense, this approach is based on the assumption that a good faith effort using unconventional alternatives in the water fraternity's view will be embraced with wild enthusiasm. I ain't seen no wild enthusiasm in my experience, except for the state, the federal government giving everybody a lot of money. I've seen wild enthusiasm for that. So, to me, you've got a strength and a weakness, and it is the notion that we've got a coherent state plan for water and state controls all the issues, when you know better than I do that local and regional agencies spend yearly almost 90% of all the money on operations and maintenance and capital for water and wastewater and capital improvement. Not the state and the federal government, it's you guys. So what changes the equation for a historic position of you can't tell us what to do, you can't tell us to do anything unless you give us money to do it, you can't enforce anything, and if you do give us money, you can't tell us how to spend it. I mean, what happens to that? Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the world has changed. But I don't think so.
Go.
I didn't check beforehand to see whether the San Diego County Water Authority had signed any of those Aqua or Urban Ag Coalition letters, but I would not be shocked if you had.
Yeah, yes, and in fact we have. The question isn't whether we are here asking that the Delta Stewardship Council command, demand, or require, as a regulatory question, whether water agencies should be doing local supply development. Water agencies are doing local water supply development, and those decisions should be left to the local water agencies to make those decisions. Let me address your point on what you identified as a flaw in that illustrative costing out chart that's in the portfolio approach. If that is a fatal flaw to the portfolio alternative, then it is no less a fatal flaw in the BDCP that they haven't stepped forward and said, here are our commitments to pay for these facilities.
Well, but yeah, look, we've built for 160 years in California a system, I agree with it, it's screwy, that's based upon preferences of people who propose projects to their benefit and indicate they want to pay some or all of the costs. That's kind of how we do things. And I join you in thinking that BDCP has a wider obligation than simple a project and mitigation. We've gone long beyond that era. But tell me how you get past that with the same collection of people, the same 400 plus water agencies up and down the state that we all know and deal with in various agencies, and tell them everybody's got to change their procedure, their practices, their habits, their spending, and so on. I mean, if there's an answer that we can do it, I'm happy. But I don't see the equation.
Let me just observe, $1 billion. Yeah?
What?
$1 billion.
You personally pledged $1 billion?
No, they're
Mr.
spending
Cushman,
$1 billion. They are spending $1 billion.
I can speak knowledgeably about what we're doing in San Diego and what we're paying for. Metropolitan is expected to pay a fourth of the cost of the Delta fix. The Water Authority is roughly 1/4 of the revenues to the Metropolitan Water District.
Right.
I'm not a math major.
You
Fourth
do
of a
20
fourth
to
is an eighth.
30% of their water.
Somewhere around an eighth. So the ratepayers of San Diego County are being expected to pay one of the largest shares of the cost of fixing the Bay Delta. So we want to have a voice in the discussion and the debate, which is why we're here today. On the local front, the water agencies are making investments. Are they making it at the same pace that San Diego's making it? My friend Jonas said $1 billion. The Water Authority just this year is completing the final phase of a $3.6 billion capital improvement program in San Diego, including south of Delta storage. The largest single increase in storage in San Diego County's history, 152,000 acre feet of storage capacity now being added behind a greatly expanded San Vicente Reservoir in San Diego County. Our ratepayers are paying for that. Our ratepayers are paying for that investment, and our ratepayers are being expected to pay an eighth of the cost of fixing the Bay Delta. So our ratepayers are stepping forward, making the commitment to make sure in San Diego County our future generations of folks have a reliable water supply and the system necessary to serve that.
Well, Mr. Cushman, you see, I agree with that. I was down at talking to your district last year, and I saw actually one of the earlier versions of the overall slideshow you've been using in the presentation, and it's impressive. It's impressive. That you don't have to sell me on that. But what puzzles me, it's puzzled me since I got in this business, is how you take all these different governmental agencies and private interests and all of that and cobble together coherent policy for the society when everybody seeks, this is my personal opinion only, everyone seeks to maintain veto power to be sure that nothing they don't like gets done. And that is a dilemma in the health field, the education field, criminal justice, everything we know about. But the water world is unique because the animosities go back to the origins of the state, and they're largely regional, which gives an interesting color and flavor to it. And I don't mean to be overly critical to the approach. That's not my intent. But I think it's a practical problem to ask BDCP a more big but a more conventional project to take a much wider view and realistically expect them to resolve it. How would they guarantee that facilities for storage be built and paid for by users? And how would they guarantee that the users who pay for it aren't simply paying for water they're not currently using and want to market it at higher prices, which may be a wise policy. I don't know if it's a wise state policy or not.
I think you deserve a candid answer to that. I don't believe they can or they will provide those guarantees. I don't think they can or will provide guarantees that there will be the money and the long-term financial commitments over 30, 50 years or more to pay for the big project. One of the concerns that San Diego has, and has had for some time, is that we right-size the facility, that it really be affordable, because I don't think after 7 years of CalFed and entering the 7th year of the BDCP, that California's future will be very bright if we shoot for the biggest possible project, which has the highest price tag, which only makes the problem that you have identified the biggest it can be, the biggest nut to crack.
Well, just say, when the project got scaled down from 15,000 cubic feet per second capacity to 9,000, it was the political big gorillas who came in the room to do it, because that's part of the political process. The interest group can't concede what they all know is going to happen anyway, and so you call in somebody else who makes an announcement, you blame them for the shrinking of size. That's just part of the process. I don't even fault that. I like that. I think that's important. And I find this whole discussion very interesting. The storage has always puzzled me, because if we built a storage facility wherever we could, God knows, and nobody's ever offered to pay for storage, in my opinion, unless they control the water. Los Vaqueros, Diamond Valley. If you control the water, that's okay. And I'm afraid if the public at large builds storage facility without asking the question, who uses the water for what purpose and at what price, you're just creating potential unjust enrichments, because all of the paper claims for water that's never been received piled onto contracts and so on prevent logical programmatic allocations of water based on need and supply and conservation and cooperation. And it goes back to the same old muddle we've been in for 160 years. Mr. Gartero.
Yeah, let me point out, because a couple of things you said have raised some red flags with me. That, and one is looking, when you mentioned historically how we've gone through and built big projects, or the people before us did that. But one of the things that occurred in that was pretty much, quite frankly, overselling those projects. For example, State Water Project, you look at the old Delta plans, it's supposed to be another 5 million acre feet of storage. It's not news to you. You've heard that repeated here a number of times, and that's disappeared. And without that, you just can't meet the contract amounts, which ought to be obvious, because they're not meeting them now, and even with the BDCP, they still can't meet them, particularly in driving. I mean, the State Water Project plan and the CVP plan was to meet 100% of those contracts in every year, except when you get in a 6-year drought, and then you only meet them, or 7-year drought, meet them 3 of the 7 years, and the other 4 you get 75%. So all the rest of the time you get 100% of your supplies. That was the plan. And I see, unfortunately, the same kind of overselling going on now. Right after the governor made his State of the State speech, I forget which legislator it was from the Valley, said he was 100% behind the governor because that was going to solve the drought problem in the Valley. And I'm pretty sure he did not get a phone call from anybody, from Jerry Merrill, anybody like that, saying, "Oh, wait, we're not solving the drought problem. Don't go selling that way." And
you haven't seen the governor's bill? It's going to outlaw droughts.
Yeah. So it's people are coming away with the mythologies that often that they want to hear out of these things, or others are just letting them have those. It doesn't solve the drought problem. And as I mentioned before, yeah, you could have big tunnels there for when the levees all fall down, but if it's a wet year, you didn't need them, because it's not going to fill up with salt water, and it's a dry year, there's no water to put in them. So, take your pick.
Just a question. One of your colleagues had told me in a conversation 10 days ago, which I didn't know, that there'd already been at least one computer run at a 3,000 cubic feet per second configuration.
Oh yeah, they've done those before.
That's right,
but not this with the not with storage.
Well, certainly not with a larger perspective.
Right.
But what did the cost run cover in terms of subject areas? The computer run, excuse me.
Yeah, that is their alternative.
Their standard
alternative 5. It came up with instead of like their alternative 4, which I mentioned earlier with the 9,000. That increases supplies by their numbers 500,000. It increases only by 350,000 on average. So that's what I was saying before. Most of the water supply benefits come from the first 3,000 CFS. You're right. You can take a look at, well, what about the fish? We want to push as much water up to the north. I mean, if they had their rules in place now and all this built with their 9,000, they'd be pumping a full 1,500 CFS today. Because that's all the rules allow, because there's only 15,000 CFS coming into the Delta. And paradoxically, in the South Delta, they would allow, under the BDCP, a lot more than they're allowing now, because they can pump more in the north. It doesn't make sense, the amount that they allow on that. Well, they say they're going to do it adaptively, and then, again, it gets back to the reliability. Will we be on the scenario where they get less because the fish are still doing poorly, and we won't know that until we build all the habitat and find out whether the clams really do invade those things and make it useless or not, which is what the ISB was warned about the other day from the clam expert, Jan Thompson.
Phil, let me close my thoughts by responding to one of your questions, which I think is central.
Mm-hmm.
It illustrates a point. What's the impact on species, not water supply reliability, of a smaller North Delta intake as part of dual conveyance? The benefits to fish would not be as good as the benefits of a 9,000 CFS tunnel if it were operated for fish. But compared to today, if you had a big one and you could operate it just right
better than
for
today,
fish,
but not as good as the other alternatives.
3,000 is better than today, and if the 9,000 ain't going to happen, does 3,000 get you all the fish benefits we would like? Would only 40,000? No. But it's better than what we'd have now, and if we keep dorking around chasing a project that's not financeable, permittable, or whatever, then we're going to see that we're going to have this conversation in another 4 years and be saying, and you know what will happen in 4 years? We got to get that EIR out. We really got to get it out, and we don't have time to have the kind of thoughtful consideration. That was my conversation 4 years ago with the administration.
I predict you will have that conversation on something involving the Delta for the next 4 years, for eternity.
Not taking that bet.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. It's been very kind of you to come. If you have additional material that you later produce, we'd love to look at it. We'll get it out to the council members as fast as possible, and I look forward with wild enthusiasm to all the folks squirming in the audience about all of this. Thank you very much. Mr. Cushman, thank you for following up.
Thank you.